Hey, I made you the manager, and this is what I get? Last month, I let it slide because you just took over. But this month's numbers are also down compared to last year. Do you know what happens if your performance is worse for 2 months in a row? Michael, the division head, said this to me. I'm sorry. The new Castle Electronics store opened 2 months ago and it's closer to the station, so we've lost a lot of customers to them. When I explained this, Michael responded, I know that. What's with the excuses? This is why incompetents are useless. The store James is managing is far from the station, which is a disadvantage. Our store is also smaller. And Castle Electronics has been advertising aggressively. Of course, we need to address this as a company. So putting all the responsibility on James is unfair. Daniel, the section chief, came to my aid. But Michael dismissed him. Are you guys trying to pass off your responsibilities onto the company? What's the point of your title and salary? The store's poor performance is entirely the manager's responsibility. It means you're incompetent. I thought, if that's the case, then the overall poor performance of the division is the division head's responsibility, right? But I couldn't say that out loud. Also, our company's salary is quite low, and we have unpaid overtime. Michael's arguments didn't make sense to me because being told to work hard for such low pay was not convincing. Would it be easier if I just accepted it and think that I just need to work harder? Is it wrong for a salaried employee to question their boss? While I was mulling over these thoughts, I heard something shocking. So, James, you don't need to come in tomorrow. You're fired. I couldn't believe my ears for a moment. I could feel the other store managers in the room freezing up as well. As Michael said this, Daniel tried to intervene again. Come on, Michael, that's too much. James understands he needs to improve the numbers, so let's leave it at that. Daniel said, trying to defuse the situation, but Michael replied, What are you talking about, Daniel? I never joke. James is fired as of today. The rest of you, if you don't want the same fate, you better raise your numbers. That's the end of the manager's meeting, and he left the room. I'm James, 35 years old. I'd been with TKD Electronics, a major electronics retail company, for 10 years. Because I graduated only from a technical school, I wasn't hired as a full-time employee and instead worked as a part-timer for a long time. It was only 2 years ago that I finally became a full-time employee. Since my student days, I was an introvert who preferred talking about shared interests with a few friends over socializing with the whole class. I thought I wasn't suited for jobs that required strong communication skills. So I chose to go to a technical school for programming instead of university. I liked working alone on a computer, so after graduation, I looked for jobs in system management and development and found a job posting for my current company. During the interview, I was told it was a hands-on company, so after being hired, I started working as a store staff member. I was told that after gaining experience on the ground, I would be moved to a suitable department. So I expected to work in the store for about a year before moving to a systems department. However, 2 years passed, then 3, and I was still a store staff member. Moreover, there was no sign of being promoted from part-time to full-time employee, and that situation also remained the same for 2. Then 3 years. Despite repeatedly asking my superiors about a transfer during contract renewals, they didn't listen. Hearing this story, one might think I should have changed jobs sooner. But I had a reason for sticking with it for 10 years. My struggle with communication improved because I had to reluctantly deal with customers at the store. In a workplace with intimidating seniors, where sales numbers are everything, you have to use your talking skills to get the customer in front of you to buy the product. There were individual sales targets, and failing to meet them meant getting scolded. Initially, I couldn't sell anything on my own, but with practice, I gradually got better at it in my second and third years. Being able to sell meant my talking skills had improved. Thanks to my job, I could now talk to various types of people, unlike in my private life where I struggled with conversations beyond close friends. I even ran into an old classmate in town who remarked, James, you've become more outgoing. So, I decided to work hard at my job until I could transfer to a system-related department where I excelled. Then, 2 years ago, I finally got promoted to store manager. I should have been happy, especially since I became a full-time employee, but I was also anxious. Initially, I was assigned to a store with good location and easy sales, and both the section chief and division head were reliable mentors. So I worked hard with a sense of purpose. But things went downhill when I was transferred to my current store. The store is far from the station, in a bad location, and a new Castle Electronics store has just opened near the station. As a result, we lost even more customers to them, making it a challenging store for me to manage as the new manager. Despite the challenges, we worked together to try various strategies to boost sales. However, there were limits to what I could do as a store manager. And it was difficult to come up with strategies that could turn things around under such unfavorable conditions. James, it's a tough store, but let's do our best together. Daniel, whom I trusted, always encouraged me, and I motivated myself to work hard every day. The division head, David, was also someone I trusted, like Daniel, but my luck ran out as he was replaced at this critical time. A new division head, Michael, who is 5 years older than me, took over, and suddenly the pressure on me increased dramatically. Other store managers are working hard, so what are you doing? Do you even realize you're in charge of a store? Oh. And I heard you didn't go to college. No wonder you can't hit the numbers. That's why technical school grads are useless. Michael would say this to me at every opportunity. He would say this in front of my juniors, so some of them would sympathize with me, saying, "Michael is really harsh," while others would gossip. Did you know James only went to a technical school? Daniel knew how tough Michael was on me and often encouraged me. However, Michael outranked him, so there were many things Daniel couldn't do to help. I tried to keep myself motivated. However, the numbers at a store with such bad conditions didn't improve quickly. 2 months after being transferred to the current store, I attended the monthly managers' meeting at the head office conference room. Feeling gloomy, thinking this month's sales were far from the target, so I'm probably going to get scolded by the division head. I opened the door to the conference room. I arrived very early, so no one else was there yet. I took my designated seat and waited for the other store managers, Daniel and Michael, to arrive. Once all the store managers and Daniel had arrived, it was time for the meeting to start. Under Michael's leadership, the meeting involved each manager standing up in turn to report their sales and issues, receiving feedback on the spot. When Michael entered the room, everyone stood up quickly, and the meeting began under a tense atmosphere. Each store manager reported their monthly sales in turn. Since we were going in seating order, my turn was last. After listening to everyone else's reports, it was finally my turn. Fully aware that my numbers were nothing to be proud of, I had no choice but to report the facts, so I read out the figures for the month. As soon as I started speaking, Michael shouted, "Hey, I made you the manager, and this is what I get? Last month, I let it slide because you just took over. But this month's numbers are also down compared to last year. Do you know what happens if your performance is worse for 2 months in a row?" Everyone in the room went silent, barely daring to breathe. "I'm sorry. The new Castle Electronics store opened 2 months ago and it's closer to the station, so we've lost a lot of customers to them." When I explained this, Michael responded, "I know that. What's with the excuses? This is why incompetents are useless. The store James is managing is far from the station, which is a disadvantage. Our store is also smaller. And Castle Electronics has been advertising aggressively. Of course, we need to address this as a company. So putting all the responsibility on James is unfair." Daniel came to my aid. But Michael dismissed him. "Are you guys trying to pass off your responsibilities onto the company? What's the point of your title and salary? The store's poor performance is entirely the manager's responsibility. It means you're incompetent." I thought, if that's the case, then the overall poor performance of the division is the division head's responsibility, right? But I couldn't say that out loud. Also, our company's salary is quite low, and we have unpaid overtime. His arguments didn't make sense to me because being told to work hard for such low pay was not convincing. Would it be easier if I just accepted it and think to myself that I just need to work harder? Is it wrong for a salaried employee to question their boss? While I was mulling over these thoughts, I heard something shocking. "So, James, you don't need to come in tomorrow. You're fired." I couldn't believe my ears for a moment. I could feel the other store managers in the room freezing up as well. As Michael said this, Daniel tried to intervene again. Come on, Michael, that's too much. James understands he needs to improve the numbers, so let's leave it at that. As he said, trying to defuse the situation, Michael replied, "What are you talking about? I never joke. James is fired as of today. The rest of you, if you don't want the same fate, you better raise your numbers." That's the end of the manager's meeting, and he left the room. Some people looked at me with pity, while others pretended not to notice, but the atmosphere was awful. James, don't worry. I'll talk to Michael later. Everyone knows it's not your fault, Daniel said, patting me on the shoulder. I appreciated the encouragement, but I thought Michael might actually fire me, and there were limits to what Daniel could do. That day, I had to go back to my store and work, but it was hard to keep a positive attitude and smile while serving customers. The next day, it was my day off. The store is open year-round, so we work on a shift basis. On my days off, the assistant manager and other staff handle the store, but as the manager, I always have a mountain of tasks to do. So I often drop by the store even on my days off. However, after the emotional blow from the previous day's managers meeting, I decided to take a proper break and relax at home. A notification sound from my phone indicated a new message. It was from John, the assistant manager. Checking the message, I saw this. A new manager has arrived at the store today, but I wasn't informed beforehand, and I'm confused. I heard you've resigned, but is that true? Lying down and looking at my phone, I was so shocked that I jumped up and shouted, "What, in my empty house?" I hurried to call John but then thought he might not be able to talk during work, so I replied via message. I haven't heard anything about that. Can you call me after work? I sent the message to John and immediately called the company. I didn't know who would answer, but it was likely to be Daniel or Michael. Hello, TKD Electronics. Recognizing Michael's voice, I quickly spoke over him. Michael, were you serious about what you said yesterday? That I'm fired? He laughed. Oh, it's you, James? Did you think I was joking? How naive. You really thought you could stay with those numbers? Someone as useless as you isn't employable anywhere. Go find another part-time job if you can. This can't be happening. I was at a loss. But refusing to be defeated, I quickly thought and said, Michael, please give me another chance. I'll increase sales. Another chance? How long do you need? Your chance is over. I was lenient your first month, wasn't I? But you blew it this month too. Goodbye. You need to sign your resignation papers by tomorrow. It's an order from the division head. He refused to listen and hung up. Realizing it was pointless to argue, I had no choice but to hang up. The next day, still unable to fully believe it, I went to the company. Michael indeed had the resignation papers ready, and I was made to sign them. Daniel, looking apologetic, said quietly, I'm sorry I couldn't protect you, James. This is my failure too. It's not your fault, Daniel. I couldn't deliver either. I replied before packing up my desk and leaving the company. Outside, I looked up at the sky. I had worked so hard for 10 years, never expecting to leave so abruptly. I recalled the previous night. After the store closed at 9 p.m., John called me. I'm sorry for calling late. We just finished closing the store, John said, out of breath. Thanks for calling even though you're busy. When I thanked him, John began to explain just how tough the day had been. When I came in for my late shift, there was a stranger at the register. When I asked Emily who was on the early shift, she said he was the new manager. I was surprised, but I thought it was a sudden personnel change and you hadn't had time to inform me. Then Michael came and said, James has resigned, so follow the new manager's orders. John continued, clearly upset. Then the new manager started changing the store layout, making it difficult for customers and us to find products. After causing a mess, he told us to put everything back the way it was. Now we have to clean up on our own, and we don't know when we'll finish. I was shocked by John's account. That's unbelievable. He just left after making a mess? I asked. Yes, he left after causing chaos, John replied. Then he said we couldn't log overtime and should mark it as leaving on time. When I was stunned, he said, with such poor sales, we can't afford extra labor costs. You understand that as the assistant manager, right? I don't think I can work with this new manager. John lamented. I felt a sense of crisis, realizing things were really going wrong. However, having been fired, I felt helpless, unable to do anything about it. I told John that being fired at the manager's meeting was not my decision, and that he could always talk to me if he had any problems. Life is tough. I muttered to myself, looking up at the sky as an unemployed man. But I couldn't keep dwelling on it forever. I had worked hard for 10 years at TKD Electronics, but the world was bigger than this. With nothing left to lose, I decided it was time to start something new. I shifted my mindset and began thinking about what to do next. Returning home, I calmed down and realized I needed to find a job. I opened my computer and started looking at job sites. Though it had been a while since I last searched for a job, I found the variety of job types had changed a lot since my student days. And it was interesting. I reminisced about my student days when I was looking for jobs in system management and development. Never did I imagine I'd be working in retail for so long. Life is truly unpredictable. As I scrolled through the job listings on the job site, one ad caught my eye. Castle Electronics Corporation. It's TKD Electronics' rival and, arguably, the reason I got fired. If Castle Electronics hadn't opened near my store, our sales wouldn't have dropped so much, and I wouldn't have been scolded by the division head. How interesting fate is. Before I knew it, I found myself applying for a position at Castle Electronics. The next day, I received a call from Castle Electronics' HR department. They scheduled an interview, so at least I wasn't being outright rejected. On the day of the interview, I dressed in a suit, feeling somewhat indifferent, thinking I'd probably be rejected anyway. Sure, having experience in the same industry might help. But TKD Electronics was significantly smaller and less reputable compared to Castle Electronics. I figured the interviewers would probably just look down on me. Castle Electronics is a rapidly growing company, popular among the younger generation. Most of the interviewees were in their 20s. Having worked at TKD Electronics for 10 years, I found myself in my mid-30s, almost 40, facing this harsh reality. The fresh young faces looking to switch jobs after gaining 3 years of experience somewhere else were dazzling. So dazzling that I jokingly thought I should have brought sunglasses. I waited in the hallway for my turn. Next please, I heard, and entered the room. The interviewer was a woman. I introduced myself, bowed, and sat down when she said so. She asked the usual questions about my education, and I answered them. Next, she would undoubtedly ask about my work history and the reason for leaving my last job. I was nervous. Admitting I was fired for poor sales performance as a manager would be the worst possible explanation. Should I lie? No, I had to be honest. While I was contemplating this, the interviewer asked a surprising question. James, what do you value most in life? Caught off guard, I hesitated but replied. Well, I want to do what I'm good at, earn a living from it, and enjoy my life. I realized halfway through and was taken aback. Damn, that wasn't the right answer for an interview. I should have highlighted what I could bring to the company. For example, I could have said that while I didn't hit the sales numbers, I was a trusted team leader. No, that wouldn't have been much of an appeal either. Then the interviewer asked, "What are you good at, James?" This seemed more like a typical interview question. How should I answer? Given my extensive experience in customer service at TKD Electronics and considering this was an interview with Castle Electronics, I decided to highlight my skills in the electronics retail industry. I have achieved top individual sales in my area. I have extensive experience in customer service. Since it wasn't a lie, I answered honestly. The interviewer then asked, "What are you good at or passionate about? Outside of the skills you've developed at work?" After thinking for a while, I replied, "Well, I like programming. I went to a technical school to develop my skills. So I enjoy working on computers and I'm good at programming." She then said, "I see. Thank you for your time today," abruptly ending the interview. I said, "Thank you," and left the room, letting out a sigh. I was sure I had failed. I knew from the start that there was no way I would get the job. But I still went to the interview because I had a tiny bit of hope. I felt completely crushed. My interview felt shorter than the others, almost like I was being dismissed outright. Exhausted, I decided to start job hunting with renewed vigor the next day. I registered with a recruitment agency and set up a meeting. Failures make me stronger. To reflect on my failure at the Castle Electronics interview the previous day, I watched videos and read books about interview techniques. As night fell and I took a break, my phone rang. Seeing an unknown number, I cautiously answered, and a woman's voice said, "This is Jessica from Castle Electronics." I was so surprised that I jumped up from my chair. "Thank you for coming in for an interview yesterday. Regarding the result. So, this company even calls those who didn't make it. What a courteous and nice company. It's really too bad I won't get to work there." As I was lost in thought, the woman continued, "We would like to offer you the position. Can you come in tomorrow?" "Did you say I got the job?" When I instinctively asked for confirmation, the woman on the other end replied in a clear, cheerful voice. "Yes. Can you start working right away? Your annual salary will be $200,000. What? Life is interesting because you never know what will happen. And so, a year passed since that event. I was having dinner after work. I was dining with John, the previous assistant manager from TKD Electronics, and Daniel, who used to be a section chief. "It's been a long time." "I'm glad to see you both doing well," John said after a long time apart. "John, you took over your family's farm, right? You look a bit tanned but healthy." Daniel, who had left the company before John, replied. Both of them had gotten fed up with TKD Electronics' ways and quit shortly after I did. Daniel now works for another major company. That company is none other than Castle Electronics Corporation, where I currently work. You guys are amazing, earning $100,000 a year. Meanwhile, I'm struggling with the hard work on the farm. Well, it's not physically hard since I have the stamina, but this summer's drought made it tough to grow crops. And then the hurricane damaged the vegetables that had grown. But all in all, things are going well. Most importantly, I enjoy the work." John shared his recent experiences. "John, when James invited you to Castle Electronics, you said, 'I'm done with corporate jobs.' That was a bold move. I, on the other hand, immediately said, 'I'm in.' By the way, James isn't just a $100,000 earner, he makes $200,000 a year." Daniel said with a laugh. "That's right." After getting hired at Castle Electronics, I headhunted John and Daniel, who had tough times at TKD Electronics. John declined, but Daniel now works with me as a colleague. I had that authority because Castle Electronics is a meritocracy that values ability over educational background or years of service. "James, you knew the competition was tough when you applied to Castle Electronics, right? What do you think led to your success?" John asked. "I haven't told you this story yet. During the interview, I was sure I'd failed. But then I got a call saying I was hired and started the next day. On my first day, I had time to talk with the president and the interviewer, and I learned an amazing fact. When I answered, John leaned forward and exclaimed, "An amazing fact," eager to hear more. It turns out that Jessica, the woman who interviewed me, was a year ahead of me at the IT technical school I attended. I didn't know her. But I was somewhat famous for my good grades, so she knew of me. Coincidentally, she had bought appliances from me at TKD Electronics and remembered my good customer service. John reacted with excitement, "Wow, that's an incredible coincidence." So, Jessica had a very positive impression of you both in school and as a salesperson. That was essentially correct, but I felt awkward saying, "Yeah, isn't that impressive?" So I stayed silent. Daniel, who knew the full details, stepped in to help. Exactly. And even more surprising, Jessica is the daughter of Castle Electronics president. The president's daughter. So, James, you were highly regarded by her, and that's why the president immediately decided to hire you? When John summarized the situation, Daniel responded, "Exactly. Jessica knew James had high-level IT skills from school and saw how well he handled customers at TKD Electronics. drawing out their needs and explaining products clearly. She also noticed how respected he was as a manager. She thought highly of his professional and personal qualities. She also knew about TKD Electronics' reputation as a tough workplace. So she didn't need to ask why he left. She assumed that if he was let go, it was the company's fault. That's why she offered to consider other talented employees from TKD Electronics if James recommended them, which is how she reached out to us. Daniel explained to John. Daniel, you've also been studying on your own and have high IT skills. But I didn't know Jessica thought so highly of me. When did you two discuss this? Daniel smiled and replied, Jessica likes you a lot, so she often asks me about your time at TKD Electronics. We talk about you a lot. Please don't tell her any weird stories, okay? I said with an embarrassed smile. Of course not. I only tell her good things. Besides, Jessica is so fond of you that if I said anything bad, she'd be mad at me, Daniel said. John chimed in with a grin, so, does that mean the daughter of the president likes you, James? Embarrassed, I stood up and exclaimed, no way. Someone like me, an introverted nobody, being liked by a beautiful and capable woman like Jessica? That's impossible. Daniel laughed and said, James, I didn't know you back in your student days. And maybe you were just a self-proclaimed introvert staring at a computer, but that's not who you are now. You're definitely a capable guy with high customer service and IT skills, and you're a thoughtful person. If I were a woman, I'd be head over heels for you. Even as a man, I admire you a lot as a colleague and friend. I was stunned, having never been spoken to like this, and had no words to respond. John added, I agree. I think you're a very capable guy, James, and I really admire you. When I was the assistant manager, you supported me a lot. Even after you were suddenly fired, you kept in touch and supported me, listening to my complaints about the new manager. Without your support, I might have been crushed under the new manager. I can't thank you enough. Feeling flustered, I said, please stop, trying to hide my embarrassment. But deep down, I felt a warm sense of appreciation. And as an adult, I was almost moved to tears. John, it became clear how competent James was right after he left TKD Electronics. The new manager was overbearing, arrogant, and clueless, causing sales to plummet. This manager was headhunted by Michael to turn things around, so when it failed, Williams, the president of TKD Electronics, blamed Michael, and eventually, Michael was fired. The company's debt ballooned. And with competent employees leaving, bankruptcy seems inevitable. John said this. Yeah, we were lucky to get out before being caught in the fire, right, John? Daniel replied, and John nodded, saying, and now, both of you are utilizing your customer service and store management skills from TKD Electronics, along with your high IT skills, to handle both internal systems and store operations at Castle Electronics. You've become key players in a major company, earning high salaries, and Castle Electronics' performance is soaring. I'm proud of my former senior's success. You're flattering us too much, John. Are you trying to butter us up so we'll treat you to dinner? Daniel joked. Oops, you caught me. John playfully replied, but we had planned to treat him to dinner from the start. Jokes aside, it was clear John genuinely admired and respected us. I have always prided myself on working diligently on whatever task was in front of me. Sometimes, it's unclear if that hard work will pay off, but moments like this show that it can. Relationships built purely on self-interest are fragile and can quickly fall apart. However, trust that has been built over time is much more resilient. Reconnecting with these valued friends is a treasure to me. I looked at the two people in front of me and thought of Jessica. These precious connections. Thank you, I murmured.